Okay, we're still here. You're doing a great job of writing in your questions, and you just experienced the strange silence of a webinar, which is another one of the things that webinars do. Sometimes we're just quiet for a minute while we ask you to think and write. Continue to think and type your questions in. And I've got your questions here. I'll read them out. When will the second draw take place? When will the program start? A couple of us have written that. When will the waivers be approved and implemented? And how to understand it better, and how to know if my family member qualifies. And we'll keep the questions coming here. How soon after my daughter ages out of the system will I hear if she is eligible? Okay, we'll try to answer all those. I think that we can, the program starting part, I can describe the factors at play to sort of describe the current expectations, and we can certainly talk about eligibilities and things like that. Okay, so let's give a little history to the ISW. So the idea behind the ISW, and our next question came in, will individuals or family members get communication on or not about level of care eligibility? Great question. Okay, we can describe all of these things and how they work. Okay, so what is the idea behind ISW? Basically, the meaning of Individualized Supports Waiver and the newer services and changes coming forth from LT, the long-term services and supports, is about being person-centered, meaning the people who we work with and who we support and their family members decide what works for them. So you decide what works for you. You and your family, you get to make choices about what the waiver will do. Very much a movement towards centeredness in services, helping people learn more about how to guide services and when to speak up and what to say and what to expect. The Individualized Supports Waiver is kind of the first program that has a choices up to $1 limit, which we'll talk about in a bit. All of the programs have choices, and they're supposed to be person-centered, and they come through a person-centered, viewpoint, but it's kind of new. So we like to describe it in that way. All right, hang on just one second. Let me get my little mouse back here. Individualized Supports Waiver is called ISW, just so that we're clear. We do get a lot of questions about that. The actual term for ISW came about from a committee of people who are self-advocates and people who get services, and the name was decided upon by like a guiding group, if you will. The law about Individualized Supports Waiver went out in a draft form, and all Alaskans who have a stake in a law that affects their life can comment about it. The comment period is over, and it has gone into like a final draft and being reviewed. So we are waiting for the final copy right now. And when it comes to regulations, when they are in effect is 30 days after they are signed by the Lieutenant Governor's office. So the journey from being a draft and getting commented and then redrafting, there's quite a bit of time in that journey. And then when it goes to the Lieutenant Governor's office and gets signed, after that day, there's 30 days until it gets implemented. So the stage where it's at, and the questions about when it will start, I cannot give it a specific date, but it has made the journey to the Lieutenant Governor's office. So we're kind of waiting for it to be signed, and then 30 days after that, it can become in effect. So our federal oversight, which we'll talk about in a bit, they've already reviewed the contents of it. So Alaska has approval from that angle to run it, but we need regulations for our state in order to run it, not just the federal ones. So ISW means choices for help you need to live your life. Really, it's all about you. People do need supports, and we're hoping that by the choices that you make and the knowledge that you have around the contents of the waiver, that your supports will be centered around your loved one or you if you're the person getting them. And the description of those supports in the plan of care makes sense and works for you and the agencies, the ones who would give your service. Okay, so the comparison here between Individualized Supports Waiver and Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Waiver, they both have a care coordinator. They help the same people. When I say the same people, that is where your questions about eligibility come in. So I don't have extensive extra slides just about eligibility, but basically to be eligible for the Intellectual Developmental Disabilities Waiver, I have to be an Alaskan. I have to have Medicaid. I have to have an assessment, and the assessment is usually the ICAP, and that's the interview where people who know your loved one or you well talk about the things that you can do and things you need help with and come up with a score. And the assessment tells that the person needs the same kind of help as people who reside in a facility that's designed to help people with an intellectual developmental disability, the same kinds of help that they need. That's just what level of care is. So it tells that people need that same kind of care. But the meaning of the waiver in Alaska is that all of the waivers provide people with services that'll help them as they live in their own home in the community. Nobody has to go to, a separate place to get care, even though they need the same kind of care. So people who live in the home and community can get services to live their life, and they can get other help they need, like doctors and, surgeries and medication and things like that through other types of Medicaid. It's kind of like a few different places people get help, or different ways to get the help they need, but it's all through Medicaid. Waivers are really there just to help you get what you need to help you and your individual, the person, your loved one, with services to live at home and in your community to do the best you can do, like anybody else would be doing throughout their life. Okay. Go ahead and give me your questions about those. There was some questions about the score. I've not received my ICAP score, even though the interviews were done 2 to 3 months ago. When will I receive my score to see if my son is eligible? The when the scores come out, it takes quite a bit of time to receive the letter for ICAP scores. If you're working with a care coordinator, it might help if your care coordinator contacts our IDD unit staff. If you are waiting quite a while like that, what does happen is about 2 months after, sometimes even longer, you get a letter. I've gotten many of these letters for my kids and for my brother, and it does take a little bit of time to receive that score, but the care coordinator can contact the unit staff here who oversees that to look into it. Okay, so it's not outside the reality that it may take that much time, but if you feel that you need, a specific answer for your person, I would call the care coordinator. Do individuals or family members get communication on not meeting level of care or eligibility? Yes, they do. The things at play have to be, you have to meet that level of care. And then for this type of waiver, of course, it serves people with an intellectual developmental disability. There are 5 types of intellectual developmental disability that these waivers help. I don't have this written in a separate slide, but I'll just throw it out there. Okay. Autism, cerebral palsy, seizure disorder, intellectual and developmental disability, which covers a few, kinds of needs that people show they have to the doctor who's doing the initial diagnosis, the main diagnosis. And the 5th one is other related disorders that are known to cause intellectual developmental disability. People are pretty familiar with some of them, like Down syndrome. That's a really, many people know about people who experience Down syndrome. That's a disability that sometimes causes intellectual developmental delay. Sometimes people don't have that much of a delay if they also have Down syndrome. There's other ones that are like that. There's many, and they discover new ones each day, almost. So that kind of diagnosis is what will bring a person in, but they still have to meet level of care. For example, I talked about my kids with autism, and I said, they have severe profound autism. Some people have autism and they won't need the waiver. They will, run circles around me and think faster than me and do things that I can't do. It wouldn't really be that they would need the waiver. Okay. Okay. So the other parts that are different here, or the comparison, is the limit on cost. The limit on costing for the ISW is new, and the intellectual developmental disabilities waiver doesn't limit cost in the same way, but it does have, everything has a limit. Everything is subject to approval. It's not like, the box is open and, the waiver will fulfill every need in a person's life. As a family member, the family provides many supports to their loved one throughout their life. Really wouldn't want the waiver to replace the things that I do. So it's really, the thinking of it is different when you think about it as a family member, but everything is limited, but it doesn't limit the cost in the same way. Waivers can't do things to replace what families do, nor would we want them. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. The ISW has certain services only, and the IDD has a larger list of services. ISW has a care coordinator. They do the yearly plan. They do amendments. Same for IDD. That's when you want to change for your services. Something you need more, you need less, a different provider, different service. For ISW, the care coordinator will visit you in the agencies when you ask. For IDD, they visit at least twice a month. And when I say visit, it might be an in-person visit, or it might be like a phone call, but they have to visit at least once a month, like face-to-face with the person. For ISW, they will, of course, visit you to get ready for the plan or for changes to it. Same thing for IDD. They visit to get ready for plans, and they visit for agencies too. I didn't exactly write that, but there are visits above the the lowest amount that the reg requires. Okay, so for ISW, there's not as much visiting, but there's not as much services in it. And if you look at it that way, it kind of makes sense. So this talks a little bit about the eligibility sort of that we talked about before. Individualized Supports Waiver helps the same people. An Alaskan with Medicaid, someone who has IDD and needs help, like people who get help in a facility like that. Okay. And the ISW is offered to people who had grant services. So the idea behind this is just to start this waiver. Alaska, all the different divisions in Alaska had to talk to legislature about saving costs. So what was designed, what we did was to gradually phase out the grant services and replace them with waiver services and keep some of the grant funding available for people who need help but didn't qualify for the ISW. Okay, so there's maybe somebody doesn't have the right kind of diagnosis or something like that. It is maybe a different situation. The person still needs help, but they're not on that waiver for whatever reason. So grant services would convert, if you will, to the ISW so that Alaska could receive part of its funding to do that work from the federal government. Grant services are paid only by the state, all state money. So if we move them to services that are partially paid by federal government, then we can say we save money. And it can help people get help, maybe more help than they used to have. So because of that, it didn't really have a wait list. What happened was people got letters and they got, ICAPs and things like that. And we were trying to get folks involved and find out who was interested in applying. Okay, so I don't know right now today how many people have accepted it. I don't think we had about 600 people that were offered to apply for this. I don't know how many people actually turned out wanting it, because what happens is a lot of times we send out communication and then we find out that somebody moved away, or perhaps they passed away, unfortunately. So they're still on our list or something, but they're not somebody who's going to want this. But we don't have all 600 people back, with applications. We're trying to make sure everybody knew about it to give people an opportunity to get on it. But there will be probably some slots, if you will, that aren't taken. So that's why I say there isn't, a wait list like that. It still is limited, but it's not a wait list. So the IDD registry / wait list, if you have applied for this waiver, this just means that, you've gotten onto that registry. It's part of the eligibility process, and you can remain on that registry wait list for the IDD waiver should you want to remain on it. So you can receive the ISW and stay on the IDD registry. Okay. My next slide here, I'm trying to get my little mouse back. My computer's being silly. In the meantime, go ahead and put in your questions about ISW. Question says, do you have to request to stay on the registry for IDD? Yes, there is a piece in the application that tells when you are applying for it that you want to stay on that registry. There are questions about visiting and the visit limits and things like that. You know, the presentation here is geared towards people who are going to receive the service. So the regulations may have a final outcome of a minimum standard of visits for a person with the ISW once every 3 months, but you can also receive a visit when you require help with your service. Okay, like I said, it's concentrating on individuals and families here. Okay, so our next slide says, Alaska Medicaid is health insurance for people who have certain needs. That big story of who receives Medicaid is past what I can explain here, but it does have rules about who can receive it. So Alaska pays for part of the cost. The federal government pays part. Again, waivers are to help people live life like anybody else with help. For the waiver, the federal government pays 50% and the state pays 50%. So that kind of tries to help you see how the state could save money by using federal money. Okay, so this slide is trying to show you the costing part. So the care coordinator cost is covered when I'm talking about these limits here, up to $17,500 per year on your choice of services. Okay. It doesn't mean that everybody will ask for or be approved for $17,500 per year. It really depends on the plan that your care coordinator makes. You may have some folks who ask for less and some may ask for the limit. It's subject to approval, just like the ISW, I'm sorry, the IDD. The cost for the care coordinator is not, I didn't factor that into here. You need to have them, so they're in there, okay? So this is just for services. Up to $5,000 extra is available in the ISW for emergency crisis purposes. Okay, for the IDD, if you need more, the care coordinator can make an amendment. Kind of the same for the ISW, but it wouldn't be able to go beyond this costing here. If you live in a rural area, for all of the services, the cost is adjusted. Okay, so for example, in Anchorage, it's $17,500 up to that amount. In Fairbanks and in Bethel, everything costs more. Okay, so the percentage of additional costs are factored into the total. So I found a comparison. Of course, this website says the name of the place as being Barrow, which is not its current name, but I couldn't find anything for Utqiagvik. I'm probably saying it a little wrong, so I know it has a new name, but it does show you that things are so much more expensive in our rural community. For example, the gallon of milk is, well, maybe even this is an old price now, but $3.88 in Anchorage, but $12 in a rural community, just as an example here. So that tries to show you that it's some things are half again as more, 0.49% more. And some of these things might be wrong too, because it's the internet. Not everything is perfect. They don't have all the information. But the meal things are pretty, you know, inexpensive restaurant. You know, they, especially for the milk prices, I think that that's kind of a good comparison. But our costing is adjusted. So you'll get the same amount of services, but they just cost more because of where they're given. The service plan is approved by SDS in all cases, and the same rules about services apply. So a lot of us are familiar with the limits on things like, for example, day habilitation. Nothing changes about the limits. If I requested all-day habilitation in my ISW waiver living in Anchorage for the total of $17,500, I couldn't get more day habilitation, just because I have that dollar limit. I could only get the amount that I'm approved for in reg and in the plan. So it doesn't change anything that's already out there about limits on services. So the list of services is here. This is kind of like a little summary of what I've talked about so far. Okay. The list of services that are in the ISW itself are here. And I have another slide that compares, which we can talk about. I'll move to that one here. And I see your questions, so just give me a second to look at those. How long is the IDD wait list? How many individuals are accepted from the list each year? It's 50 individuals per year. And I think I need Sina's help to remind me about how many people are on that wait list.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it in quite a long time or heard an update. So the last time I looked, it was less than 500. So
Okay.
and to understand that it's not really necessarily the wait list, the registry, DD registry contains a lot of individuals that are just listed on the registry. They're not requesting services. They're not, they're there so that they can access different types of funding, but it's not that they'll be looking for waiver funding. They're just a recognition that what we term as the wait list is not completely that. So when I say a number of less than 500, don't think that that's, oh my gosh, I'm 1 in 500 waiting for this. No, that's not necessarily correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so question says, what is deemed an emergency or crisis? It would be something like a person's caregiver is not able to give care. They have to travel out for a medical emergency and respite is needed. It just means that the person has extenuating circumstances in their life that they need to have more services to keep the person safe in the community. Maybe maybe there's the person, your loved one, or somebody we serve, or anybody has a time in their life where they have the need for a positive behavior support plan or something like that for they're over age 18, like intensive active treatment. It's just regarding that if they didn't get those services, they would have to theoretically enter an institution, or there would be a risk to their health and safety. They don't need something that's provided, like if they're having a medical emergency, well, they're going to have to go to the hospital or something like that. That's not waiver Medicaid. Waiver supports are there when you're living your life in your community. And if you need extra help to stay in that community, and everybody thinks and says, and the reasonable person, would look at your situation and your care coordinator writes it down so that the state can understand what's going on. Yeah, it looks like, Kara had a medical emergency and she has to go out of state for her care, and her kids need some extra help with services. They're staying in Anchorage during that time. Okay, that makes sense. So then it would be approved. So it's that type of thing. Question says, does the ISW difference for rural cover cost for travel to Anchorage? if that's the only place where care is available. No, it isn't really that kind of thing. The care that's done in the rural community is done by the agencies that serve there. It's not that agencies are going to send folks from another place to do something there. They need to be local to that place. Okay. Uh, Someone asked the question, when will they hear the ICAP scores? We haven't been contacted and our reference person hasn't been contacted. Does this mean we got passed over or they just haven't gotten to us yet? No, you're not passed over. Um, it could be that there's delay in getting to everyone. As you can imagine, there was kind of a bigger bubble of ICAP assessments and scores to be, you know, gone over and given out to people. It doesn't mean that. It best answer really right now today is to just ask your care coordinator to contact the IDD unit about your particular case. And if they have information, they'll be able to give it. So, just from my own experiences with the ICAP scores, it can take 2 to 3 months to get the paper back, the letter back. Okay, a couple questions about what the in-home supports are. How do they pick the 50 per year for the waiver? Does age play a factor? That's a great question. People who get picked for the IDD, there is a criteria that is informed by advocacy, and just looking at the population of people with IDD and people's needs. So um, a lot of the populations that the people that we serve that come off the wait list, there might be, for example, people who are ending school and they don't have other supports, like somebody who's age 22 coming out of school. They need to carry on with their life and do something that they're going to be doing for the rest of their life and they live at home, and they don't have other supports, meaning other paid supports. That's kind of a target population. I hate that word, but you know what I mean, I hope. The other kinds of situations that people coming off the wait list might be somebody who is aging, living with aging caregivers, like if the parents are um, elderly people, elder parents, and the person is an adult, living with their parents and they don't have other supports, and their parents aren't going to be able to give care a whole lot longer. Um, Other kinds of factors come into the very young people, medically fragile children, people who are in transition times, things like that. And then there is also wait time factored into it. If people have severe crisis situations where they have lost all their supports in the community, like parents suddenly die or there's just isn't anyone there to care for them, then that would rise to the level of a crisis type of situation. So there are crisis draws too. It has to clearly show that there are no other supports available to that person. Okay, I'm looking at my computer and okay, we haven't been interviewed yet. I was wondering if that will still be happening. Assessments. Okay, so an assessment hasn't happened yet. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, the care coordinator can help you with that. And the care coordinator can always ask me too. I mean, we can also try to help. I mean, the IDD unit is the best one to contact because your information is private, to you and whoever you say can know. So care coordinators can ask me general questions and I can answer general questions, but for your particular case, they're still your best, your best resource. Okay. So let's talk about what these are. In-home supports, the question says, would an iPad be considered an in-home support? No, it's not. These are waivers are like people to do hands-on care. iPads and devices like that, though, you can apply for those under the mini grant. So if you don't know about the mini grant, you could contact your care coordinator or a STAR agency or even the Aging and Disability Resource Center. Mini grants are out there for equipment and things like that. So, but what are these services? Respite has a specific definition. Respite is kind of weird. It's the only service that is really for somebody else other than the person. Respite is a caregiver to care for you or your loved one when your main unpaid caregiver is away. And if you are the main unpaid caregiver, like a mom or family member or somebody who does most of the care for this person, then the respite worker lets you take a break. And that is for having a break, not for going to work and things like that. It doesn't do anything else but give you a break. So it's somebody to do what you would do for your person on any given day, basically. Right? InHome Supports for under age 18 is a person, a worker to work one-on-one with your loved one, your child, your young person, to learn things that kids do at home, simple things that you identify that they might be learning, like how to keep their room neat, how to organize their play area, different kinds of communication that people can learn in the home setting, um, play skills, things they might be working on at school with self-care, or just plain old self-care at home. A lot of times people are working on personal hygiene and grooming and dressing and things like that. But it is teaching and training to do those things, not just doing those things for the person. So it's not a worker who just comes and does things like give a bath or change diapers or things like that. It's going to be supports to help your loved one, your young person, learn more so they can be more independent. Supported living, same idea, but over the age of 18. And that is to help the adult/young adult learn to be more independent at home, a one-on-one worker for that. Dayhabilitation is activities that are done in the community to help a person learn more about anything that they do in the community. A lot of times it's communication, being with a group, learning how to take your turn at something, being interested in things that happen in the community and learning more about participating, um, getting skills of communication so that you can get enjoyment out of activities that people do in the community. And it's teaching and training and goals about becoming more independent when you're interacting in your community. It's not just for the purpose of getting them out, right? A lot of people think it's get them out in the community. Well, it's not just that, because everybody gets to go to the community. It doesn't just physically travel you there and then travel you back. It's more than that. It's help to do more for yourself and to get more out of life in your community. Intensive active treatment is an interesting service. This is a specific plan for help for an adult to receive treatment directly to them, the adult, for something like positive behavior supports, to address an issue that they're facing, like the adult's having trouble with something. Maybe their circumstances have changed at home and the adult is having trouble processing that, and they need help communicating how they feel. Maybe they're communicating in ways that aren't working for them, things that are dangerous maybe, and they need help to learn how to communicate how they feel so that they can work it through and get over to the other side of their how they feel. And that would be intensive active treatment. A professional like a psychologist or a nurse or somebody makes a plan like that for an adult. For children, it's covered under regular Medicaid, basically. Okay. Chore, somebody to come in and clean the home when there's nobody else available to do it. They person can receive chore. This is really not for children as well, because children always have a caregiver, who does those things. So maybe an adult lives on their own and they need somebody to come in and help with chore. Could be some basic meal prep and things like that too. Non-medical transportation is going to be rides to and from community locations, not medical rides to appointments, but activities in the community. Separate from day-hab. Supported employment is help to to work while you're on the job, while you have a job. It could be self-employment, could be community employment. There's a limited amount of help that's called supported employment for pre-employment, like learning skills before you work, that type of thing. So comparing it to intellectual and developmental disabilities waiver, there are other services here. You can see that these are out of home living for the person, like a group home for adults. A person would go with peers to live in a home together, and that's a 24-hour service. Family home hab is the same type of thing, except they live with a family instead of in a group with their peers. Family hab is available to children as well, so that's going to be, the other waiver. Meals would be either home delivered or congregate meals, perhaps. Those could be available. Again, there's age limits around all these things. I don't have all the rules around every single one of them printed, up here to see, but there's rules around, for example, meals. When I'm a child, I have a caregiver who gives me the meals, so it's not requested for kids. Nursing oversight and care management is for our medically fragile child's waiver, nurse to oversee the care and what goes on with the work that the people who do the work for the waiver services do. The medical allowed work, care that they could do in a home, if any. Specialized private duty nursing is direct nursing care to a person at home. Perhaps they need a procedure for wound care or something like that for a condition they just basically live with throughout their life, or something else that they could be done at home, but a nurse must do it. And specialized medical equipment is things like a wheelchair lift for a van, hand controls for driving if I don't use my feet to drive, it's that type of thing. It's a whole list of things that a person could choose that help the person at home because they have a disability. Just equipment, basically. I forgot to put on there environmental modification, but that's on there too. And environmental modification is just adaptations to your living environment, meaning your physical environment, where you would have a builder come and widen a doorway, something like that, and you would have that covered by the waiver. I'm just going to put EMOD here really quick, environmental modification. Okay, so this has been a kind of a comparison of the two. Additional questions that you have, we're coming up here at just up on the 1 o'clock hour. Hopefully I've been able to answer most of your beginning questions, and I will look for your last couple of questions here. Oh, hang on. Let's talk about your questions and comments. It says, okay, it says, explain the family home care a little more. Could a sister care for them instead of a group home? Family home habilitation is when a person with a disability who comes into the waiver and gets the IDD waiver They could be really any age, but their home they live in, and for family habilitation, that home has to be licensed. They have to be a licensed home, licensed by assisted living licensing. And their family home that they live in cannot be their immediate family. Okay, so it's not it's not their immediate family. Immediate family is defined basically as their guardian um, and their parent. So if a person's an adult and their sister is an adult and the sister has a licensed home and does family hab in that home, it's possible that a sister could care for the person. It's possible. But there's a lot of different kind of rules they'd have to follow first. They'd have to go get licensed. They would also have to establish a relationship with an agency that does family habilitation in order to receive payment for that. And then when the person, would move into that home, the plan would have to show, why that's the best choice for them as opposed to all others, including natural supports. So it's more than just moving and things like that. There's a lot of compliance around it. There's compliance with settings rules about homes when it comes to homes. What is the advantage of ISW over IDD? That is really up to the person. It isn't there isn't really any kind of an opinion qualification I could give. Um, it does offer options. I guess the advantage of it is that it's available now to people. Um, there's just choices. I don't really have a qualification to it. I know that because we've only ever had IDD, people keep talking to me about the big waiver versus the small waiver, and I get that, but it's kind of a step-by-step thing. If something is available sooner, then the person might take advantage of something that is available as opposed to waiting, considering that you can continue to wait on the registry for the other options. I've talked to lots of parents and families and people, and they don't really feel that they would have their person placed in residential outside of their own home. And then some people want to move out and go live in the group home, and they're like, yeah, I want to live with friends, and I don't really have a value on that. It's really personal. It's up to the person. Okay, so I've gone over a couple of minutes here. Um, I would like to thank you for being a part of our first waiver for people, families, individuals, families. I want to put my contact information here. Uh, you can email me with questions if you want. Um, if you want to be part of more webinars that we do, go ahead and put your hand up, and then we can kind of keep a list of folks who might want to know more. The other thing that I'd like you to do before you go, if you can at all, is if you have to go, I understand you can just leave the webinar, that's okay. But if you want to give me suggestions for more topics, I would be more than happy to receive those here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and close our session for now. I will leave the webinar open. I will turn off the audio. I'll leave it open for like another about 3 minutes or so. If you want to shoot me some ideas for new webinars for you and other people, I would love to hear them. If not, that's okay too. We'll catch up someday, I am sure. But anyway, thanks so much for spending an hour with us here, a little bit over, and we hope to talk with you again soon. All right, so have a great rest of the week, everybody. Goodbye for now.